Hello, hello, hello. We are live. It is time for Rising Together. I am so excited to be hopping on. I see folks jumping in to join us this evening. We are streaming on Challenge the Stats YouTube and Facebook pages. Hey, everybody who is jumping on and joining us. It's so fantastic to be here as part of this event and really to amplify some incredible voices this evening. Hello, folks. I see everybody hopping on, joining us here in the stream. It's going to be an incredible night tonight. A quick overview of what will happen. You all will hear some unbelievable voices of some unbelievable musicians today. Included in this event, not only is discussion, but also a very powerful performance by CTS dancer Michael Morris Jr., who is performing the work of Connor Chi. And so we're so excited. Thanks for joining us. Hey, Max, thanks for popping on. If you're joining us now, drop a comment in the chat, say what's up, give us a hand wave, some emoji arms. We're so excited, and we want this to be an engaging evening of discussion. We love all of the thumbs up and the encouragement as we build this community that is really working towards collective liberation. So thank you again for hopping on with us this evening. Again, my name is Angelica Hairston. I am the founder and executive director of Challenge the Stats, which is an organization that empowers BIPOC artists and uses music as a tool for social justice. And we could not be happier to present this event this evening, Rising Together. I see all of the beautiful comments coming in. Hey, Riva, thanks for joining us. She's excited to be here. Hey, Lindsay, thanks for hopping on with us. Verena is here. Jens is here. It's a fantastic time for us to build community together, and we're so grateful that you are joining us. So before we go any further, I do want to acknowledge where this stream is originating. And I am in Decatur, Georgia, in my living room here, and acknowledging that this is the occupied territory of the Muskogee Creek peoples, who stewarded this land for generations, and acknowledging the continued liberation of the Muskogee Creek peoples. And, you know, as I join from Decatur today, I also want to acknowledge what we all saw happen on a national scale in Atlanta recently with the murders, the brutal murders of our Asian sisters, just really close by in the Atlanta community, and just honoring and recognizing the deep loss of life, and also just the need for continued fight against the evils of white supremacy. And as we join tonight, you know, I'm reminded of a quote by Lila Watson, who is an Australian Aboriginal artist, and she reminds us that our liberation is tied together. That, you know, Fannie Lou Hamer said, nobody's free until everybody's free. And so as we continue this conversation, thinking about how we amplify voices, I just want us to listen, not only with ears to enjoy and to take in what's said, but also with feet for action, that we are listening and thinking of tangible ways to really work towards change in our communities through listening to these powerful women speak tonight. It's, again, a thrill to be here. My name is Angelica Hairston. I am the founder and executive director of Challenge the Stats. We've got people joining from all over. Hey, Andrew, thank you so much for joining us. Hey, Townsend, that's right. We cannot get complacent. I love it. It's so fantastic to have all of you joining. Please continue to drop things in the chat. Again, this is Rising Together, and we are joining as part of Challenge the Stats in residence at First Presbyterian Church of Atlanta. So a little bit about one of our guests. And I'm so excited to spend some time in conversation with her. Challenge the Stats received a grant recently that allows us to perform live stream concerts into hospitals during the time of COVID-19. And those live streams are reaching children and healthcare workers in Georgia and we're really, really excited about the ways that we are normalizing young children seeing BIPOC artistry from a very early age. And one of the musicians on our roster who has been streaming in this year is Renata Yazzie, and I'm so excited to welcome her on with me. Hey, Renata.
Hi, Yate. Thank you for having me. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm excited. We are so thrilled to have you. So thrilled. Everybody's so excited in the chat. People are joining. People are commenting. Renata, tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe share a little bit about where you're joining from today.
Yeah, Yate, she Renata Yazzie Yinishia. Twa hagini nishla ki ani bashish chin, but I think that she chehunratni dashinale. What that the Ultra University of New Mexico to Inchtra. Musicology do piano performance by Inchtra do bohush akot ego de nas dan nishle. So good evening, everyone. My name is Renata Yazzie. I am a Navajo or Diné pianist and musicologist, amongst many other things, many other hats that I wear. Let's see here. I'm coming to you today from Albuquerque, New Mexico, which is on unceded Tewa lands. And yeah, that's where I'm at.
I love it. Thank you, Renata. And what I love about all that you do is that you do this incredible research that is so necessary in the field right now. Would you share a little bit about some of the research you're doing right now while you're in school?
Yeah, so currently at the moment, I'm working on a master's degree, and my thesis is about Navajo hymnal music, which I'm talking about the translation work, establishing a historical narrative of the different hymnals that we have here on the Navajo Nation, and talking about the translation work and addressing one of the questions that I'm addressing is, how do you say hallelujah in Navajo? That's kind of it's a question that sums up sort of what I'm talking about. But apart from that, I'm very much engaged with research on classical music and indigeneity in classical music, and how indigenous classical musicians are navigating these spaces. And then in addition to that,
right,
something else I'm really interested in is music cognition and music theory and applying indigenous scientific frameworks to that. I have a bachelor's degree in chemistry, and so that's also one of my interests that some people think is a little bit out there, because it's like, wait, you have a what? You got a degree in what? And I'm like, yes, I know.
Yes.
But yeah, that's also something I enjoy doing alongside, learning languages and cooking and baking and all of that.
I love it. I love it. She has so many incredible skills and abilities. And I think, one of the things that I love about you, Renata, even from the first time that we spoke, was your heart for really encouraging other musicians in the classical field and really supporting them, amplifying their voices. And I know that you've done that even recently through the work of a new scholarship that has launched. Will you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, so this is the American Indian Musician Scholarship that I actually started back in, I think, 2018 at the very beginning. I just started grad school and realized how pitiful funding is for people who study music, but also people like Indigenous students, American Indian students who are wanting to study music. Scholarships are few and far between for musicians. And then on top of that, for Native musicians, it's even harder to be a competitive applicant for some of those scholarships that actually are worthwhile and offer a lot of funding. So yeah, I started this, and it kind of, I kind of had a little bit of a time getting it off the ground, but I'm happy to announce that I was able to partner with the Heartbeat Music Project.
Yay!
The Heartbeat Music Project, they provide free tuition-free music education for Navajo students K through 12. And they are fiscally sponsored by the Roadwork Center. So I was able to kind of jump in with them. And yeah, so now we have a scholarship, and if you know of any Native students who are studying music, undergraduate students, I would encourage them to apply. And yeah, our deadline's coming up here at the beginning of April. And also, if you are interested in donating, you can go to the heartbeatmusicproject.org, which the website is listed there on the poster. And there's a donate tab where you can write in the little comment area that it's for the scholarship, and all donations are tax deductible. So
Awesome. It's such a fantastic initiative, as Yen says. It really, really is. We've got lots of yays and congratulations coming your way. It is such a powerful thing when musicians not only, want to work for their own art, but they want to build their community as they do it. And I think that is such a core tenet that I know of you, and it's so fantastic to see this launching. And so what is your kind of like long-term vision? What would the classical music world look like, as we continue to indigenize?
I've talked with, I was talking with one of my friends who was another Navajo music student. She graduated recently with her bachelor's in music education. She's a flutist. And one day we were just sitting around the practice rooms, slacking off.
Right.
And she's like, what would it take to have a Navajo Nation Symphony Orchestra? So we started going down like all the things we'd have to do to get to that point. Like, okay, so first we would need to have people. That means like getting young children interested in music now and giving them the opportunity to go to school for music in order to play at that level. And then it's like, well, what are we going to play? and so that's, working with Navajo composers and other Native composers to create a repertoire, a whole oeuvre, however, I'm sorry, my French is terrible.
I love it.
Yeah, of works that are done by Native people for Native people. And then from there, it was like, well, where are we going to play? And so what kind of spaces can we create, like physically, like a building where, what kind of concert space are we going to have? Is it going to be a concert space? Like, how are we going to work with the community? And in what ways are we going to, make it their space?
Yeah.
Exactly. Their space, I say their space, but also our space.
Right.
And then from there, it's like there's a whole bunch of research that could be done on Navajo music, and how are we going to put that research back in the hands of Native scholars,
right,
where they are doing the work for the community that they are coming from, if that's something they want to do. If that's something that they want to do. Yeah. And because so much of the research, the ethnomusicological research, ethnomusicology, the field is built on studying Native music. Some of the biggest names in ethnomusicology made their careers off of, especially and particularly, studying Navajo music. How do we reclaim that scholarship and move forward? And so there's also like that aspect. yeah, it's a whole thing.
Yeah, it is. And that's, that's what it's about. It's sort of building these new tables and these new seats and these new worlds where there's a whole new idea of welcome, where welcome looks totally different than what we have traditionally had in the classical music field. And so it's so exciting, again, to hear about the scholarship. Please make sure that you check it out, and the amazing ways that Renata is continuing to amplify other voices in the field through her work. And so this evening, we're going to have an amazing discussion. I'm so excited, really to sit backstage so that I can learn and listen and also be called to action this evening. And I'm really thrilled to welcome on Brie McCullough, who will be joining Renata. Hey, Brie.
Hey.
Yes. Can we just look at this screen, y'all? Yes. Women. Yes. There is power, women power. And I'm just so excited for both of these brilliant thinkers. We had a pre-planning conversation, and it was truly eye-opening and really, really incredible to hear from these wonderful women. So I'm going to turn it over to Renata. I'm going to fly out, and I will let you all take it away. Thank you for being with us.
Hi. Yeah. So Brianna is a Carrick violist from Bozeman, Montana, and she has been performing professionally since the age of 14 with various orchestras and ensembles and artists, including the Bozeman Symphony, the Concordia Orchestra, the I-90 Collective, Leon Joseph Littlebird, Patrick Leonard, and more. Brianna holds degrees in music performance and women and gender studies from the University of Colorado Boulder, and had begun a master's degree in music at Indiana University, but is now currently acting as an independent scholar. Go Bree! Brianna's research interests include Indigenous representation in early music and indigenizing the realm of period performance practice. So a warm welcome to you. Yay!
Ayuti, everyone. Nana Tuete, Brianna McCullough. Nawada Karuk Arar. Hello. I'm Brianna McCullough. I'm part of the Karuk tribal nation. I'm so happy to be here. Renata, I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. Yeah, I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, so did you want to tell us a little bit about your research and what you've been up to lately?
Sure. So I've spent a lot of time really just diving into some of the early music that has Indigenous representation within it and what that looks like in reclaiming that space, that's going to look like when we perform those works from an Indigenous perspective. So that's extremely important to me. A lot of the work that I do also revolves around activism. So giving space and creating space to empower certain voices. Obviously with COVID, it's been hard with performances and such, but of course, we've been able to create spaces such as this one in order to continue conversations. So yeah, and so I am currently actually looking at pursuing a PhD here. The decision process is underway, so that's been very exciting. And yeah, I'm excited to finally be able to really jump back into the research that I'm doing and really become a part of a space that's extremely supportive and actually allows for the ability to exist and or bring light to some of these ideas on what it means to indigenize and exist as an Indigenous person within the sphere of Western art music. So yeah, that's kind of what I've been up to.
Cool. You want to give us maybe an example of a piece in early music that people might not have heard of or people might not be familiar with that is influenced by our people?
Yeah, well, one of the works that really inspired my interest in this topic was Rameau's Les Onze Galants. There is a section called Les Sauvages that was actually written and inspired by some individuals that went over to France. And so they gave a performance, and Rameau was inspired enough to actually write a piece reflecting on that experience. So, of course, throughout time, the history has been somewhat forgotten. So what I've been really working on is actually trying to reestablish and create that space and reflect on those alternative histories. So what it means to be an Indigenous person engaging with these works, and coming from, various epistemological and ontological perspectives that could potentially be influence what it means to practice performance practice as an Indigenous person, and really honestly try to warp the way that we practice this engagement with these pieces, and how we try to interpret, especially with the Indigenous perspective included and or recognized. So yeah, that's one of the works. Les Ons Galants is what that's by Rameau. So yeah.
I think so. There's the that piece shows up in one of his I think piano suites. I know it's in G minor, like the suite is in G minor because G minor is my favorite key. And I was like, I have to write about. So for a class, like I had to write program notes for it, and I was laughing because one of the pieces that's like earlier in the set is talking about the context of it is supposed to be like a rodeo, not a rodeo, but like a had to do with like farm animals and stuff. Mm-hmm. And yeah. I was laughing because a long time ago on our reservation we used to have rodeos, and what they had this event called a chicken pull where you would get on horseback and you try to catch these chickens. And I was laughing because that was the first thing I thought of when I saw that piece. And I kind of related it. That's how I related it back to, some of the experiences. Well, not that I've ever been to one of those, because those are it's something that was popular back in the day. But it's something that, my grandparents and so forth, they spoke of and were familiar with. So
yeah, it's interesting even seeing some of the ways it's interpreted in opera these days, some of these animals, the descriptors that, they had, and what they visualized, buffalo as, what buffalo looks like and such. It's a really interesting thing to be diving into.
It kind of reminds me of like when explorers would come back with like descriptions of exotic animals, and they'd be like, it has like the neck of a chicken and the back of a boar, and it's like, what is this thing? And people would do like literal drawings of what this animal might look like, and it turns out it was supposed to be like a giraffe or something like that. Yeah, it kind of that just reminds me of that. Anyways, yeah, so why don't we dive into some of these questions that are going to just guide the discussion that we're having this evening. Can you outline your journey to becoming a classical musician? Like, what did that look like for you?
Well, music was kind of a way to process my experiences growing up. So music was a way for me to also connect with some people as well. Like, I formed some of the most important relationships in my life through music. One of my first teachers was one of my closest friends. And then, of course, when I went to CU Boulder, Erica Eckert became a really inspirational and supportive figure to me as well. So it just seemed like the right place to exist, because these people were really invested in creating spaces and inspiring kind of what it means to be a musician, but also, I guess, existing within the field and what we can do in order to make it better. So that's kind of the background that I have. I started in 5th grade on the viola, and I was actually tricked into it. I was so determined to play violin and be the soloist, but there were 5 violins and there were no violas, and my teacher back then was like, well, if you're a violist, you'll be a soloist because you're going to be the only one. I picked up the viola and I learned what the C string was, and I've been with it ever since. And I was the only violist for probably 2 or 3 years in my orchestra. And then I got a little bit tired of the exposure and turned into a real violist and the orchestra. So yeah, that's my background with music and how I started as a classical musician.
Yeah, I started really young when I was like 3, and my mom played piano. She was and is classically trained, and she noticed that I just, I enjoyed listening to her, and I'd hop up on the bench next to her while she was playing and try to follow along. And so she started teaching me, little songs. I had learned songs by myself just by ear, but she started teaching me a little more formally, and we learned about notes and the keys and really basic music theory kind of stuff. And then when I was 4, she was like, okay, you've been doing this for a couple months now, and it's not every toddler can hold their attention on one thing for that long. So I think you might be interested. So let's, she put me in Suzuki piano lessons. And I did that till I was 10. Then we moved to the reservation, and I didn't have a teacher for 11 years. I kind of picked it a little bit back up in high school. I played with the high school orchestra. I did a movement of a Bach keyboard concerto, and kind of got a little bit more involved with accompanying and things like that. But yeah, I went to school as a pre-med student, and at some point decided that I wanted to do more music than I was, which was not doing more music than I was doing at that time was not a hard thing to do. So I auditioned for now my professor, but his name is Professor Steinbach. And I auditioned for his studio, and he was like, okay, all right, I'll take you. And I studied with him in undergrad for, I think, 3 years as a music minor. Like, I was taking music classes, even though I didn't need to anymore. And then I graduated, and I went to graduate school for music. And yeah, so here I am now, still.
And now you're here, and
music.
And now,
yeah,
we performed together, and we met, and that was really exciting for me. Is when I was at you, and I heard of this other Indigenous musician. Like, I was like, Renata, who's this Renata? And I don't know. Yeah, reaching out to you, I was like, hey, this scholarship idea is so amazing. I think it's phenomenal. And then here we are.
Yeah. So the National Society for Ethnomusicology meeting was in Albuquerque, and we met and we played one of Conor Chee's pieces. Yeah, we rehearsed on this really terrible piano. Like, it was so out of tune. But we made it work, and it was really beautiful. The next day we played for a bunch of ethnomusicologists, and yeah, it was fun. It was some good stuff. So
yeah, that was a very good time. Okay, what does it mean to exist as an Indigenous musician within the sphere of Western art, music, and academia? Do you want to start that one off, Renata?
Yeah, I guess for me, a large part of it for me is my just existing, being able to exist as a Native person, as a Diné person within this field. For me personally, much of it is rooted in reclaiming and educating and bringing about change and what's the word? I refuse to let people continue to sit in their ignorance about Indigenous issues in music. And, you know, there's a whole field of composition that is dedicated to using Indigenous melodies and songs in art music. And I have many thoughts about that. And I think it's for me to exist in this space means that these non-native musicians, white musicians who do this can no longer get away with it, can no longer put it out there and release really derogatory and hurtful music. Mm-hmm. That's one thing, I guess, one aspect of this for me. But ultimately, it's creating a space where I don't have to be resilient. People are like, "Oh, you're so strong. Oh, you're so brave. Mm-hmm. You're so resilient." You know, Native people, they've gone through so much. And I want to create a space for other Native musicians where we can just be Native. We can just be us, without always having to go to battle over even just the smallest things. So,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was thinking about that a little bit too, because before I got into college, it was definitely a part of my identity, but it was definitely put under almost a microscope when I got into college, being Native. And it really, like you said, this existence, like it was almost like I was constantly defending my existence or proving to people that we even exist still. So, and that we're in these fields, and we deserve to be recognized, and we deserve to be able to have the opportunity to bring our various perspectives to the table, because we have very different worldviews, and being able to have the space to not only exist, but be able to fully live within ourselves and our communities is so, so important. Yeah. And so, yeah, what does it mean to exist? A lot of my inspiration comes from just being able to have the opportunity to try to forge a path, be a part of building the opportunities for younger musicians and future generations to be able to just come do what they love, wherever that is, whether it's in music or whether it's in creating benefit opportunities, whatever it is. Obviously, I function more so within the field of Western art music and academia, and that's where I feel comfortable trying to make these changes and challenging these individuals and or systems. But yeah, it's for me, it's about being able to make a difference and create opportunity for younger people and future generations. And I like what you mentioned when it comes to bringing up and challenging these individuals and making sure they're comfortable in being uncomfortable. Recognizing that being uncomfortable means that you're growing, and being uncomfortable means that you're having the opportunity to acknowledge and or start to dismantle these practices or systems that are extremely damaging to BIPOC, LGBTQ+, disabled individuals. Like, we need to start dismantling those systems, and it's going to be an uncomfortable process. And I think my existence within the field, as much as I possibly can, I'm going to try to create that space. So, yeah. Okay, what is the legacy of Indigenous voices in the classical field? I like this question. I find it, it's a little bit difficult to think about, though, because there is a legacy, but it's one in which has been somewhat not recognized and is still being built as we speak. Like, involvement of Indigenous peoples within the classical field has been very, I guess how to put it. It's there, but it's definitely hard to find, and it's hard to come to terms with what our ability to exist in the field is again, and what that looks like. So I think a lot of about boarding schools and marching bands and what marching bands were used for, the process of assimilation, and how it's important to recognize those histories. And not only that, but also recognize the ability to engage with the music itself and use it as a form of strength and inspiration and reconnection. And I think it speaks a lot to our ability to relate and or exist within the contemporary world.
Yeah, I think part of it is learning how to reapply Indigenous epistemologies to song. We're engaging with this music, but we're not thinking of it, and we're not engaging with it in the same way as our peers, because we have a whole background of lived experiences as Indigenous musicians, and a connection to our people and to our land that influences the way that we interact with this music. But when I think of sort of the legacy of Indigenous voices, I'd like to, there's this Korean rapper, his name is Tablo. And in one of his most recent songs that came out, one of the things that one of his lines is, I paved the way for everyone that is paving the way. Because he kind of was the beginning of Korean hip hop coming out from the underground. Like, it's kind of, he's talking about BTS, he's talking about these Korean pop and hip hop groups that, were inspired by them and what they were doing 20 years ago. And so with that in mind, that specific lyric where he says, I paved the way for everyone that's paving the way, I want to acknowledge some of the senior scholars in our field who made it possible for us to come to this point. Mm-hmm. Dr. Browner, Dr. Williams, Dr. Bizet Perea, and they're, three incredible Indigenous scholars who we have had the opportunity to look up to when they didn't have necessarily anyone to look up to within academia. And I wanted to take a little bit of time to acknowledge their scholarship and the impact they have had on us as we are coming up to pave the way for more students. So, I wanted to do that.
Yeah. How can we honor and support Indigenous communities in our daily lives?
By our music.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Support us. We were talking about as well as what it means to be an ally, and an active ally, a visible ally is somebody who is stepping up to the plate and to make themselves known and to actually do some of the work that is really can get extremely exhausting. Constantly, explaining certain things and this and that. I think is a definitely important aspect of what a good ally is. I love to see people who are active and wanting to make themselves visible in the help of dismantling these systems.
And to do that without clout chasing.
Yes. Very, very good point. Yes. Absolutely.
In addition to that, I think showing up, like, those of you who are here today, thank you. Thank you for showing up. Show up to our concerts, show up to our events, show up to our album releases, show up to our recitals, and to our talks. And I think, I really appreciate what Challenge the Sets has done here by giving us this platform to speak as we want to, and to do that with Indigenous creators, to say, here is a platform, here is an audience, and we'd like to give you the opportunity to speak your truth, to say what you need to say what's on your heart, without censoring, or without there being an expectation of, what is the word? Trying to think of the word, where you're expected to be polite, where you're expected to say things, carefully and yeah, I can't think of the phrase right now, but yeah, where you don't put those expectations, and it doesn't come with that caveat, where you just give us a place to speak. I really appreciate that, and I'm really thankful to Challenge the Sets for providing this space to do that. And it needs to happen more often, not just with us, but with there's a whole group of Indigenous musicians and creatives who have different opinions than us, who think differently from us, who also should have a chance to speak their truths and speak what's on their mind, and to give them that space to do that. So I think for me, that's one of the biggest ones, and put that out there, like, do that, give them that space, and then show up.
Yes.
And then when you're all done, go home and get on Bandcamp and buy their album. On Fridays, when they have like the Bandcamp Fridays, where all the proceeds go to, go to them. Who are some of the Jeremy Dutcher.
Jeremy Dutcher, yes. If you don't know who Jeremy Dutcher is, immediately after this, look up Jeremy Dutcher. Jeremy's work is really phenomenal and just out of this world inspiring. So,
yeah, Jeremy is a classically trained pianist and tenor, and he is also a musicologist. He spent time with archived recordings of his people's songs. And he's one of about 300-ish speakers left of his language. But his music, he literally sings with his ancestors. Like, he sings along with the recordings, with them. And it's really powerful. And that's, it's just amazing to hear. Plus he's just a really amazing musician. So him, I also, and you'll get to hear Connor, but Connor Chi, reflecting back on where I grew up, Connor and I, we probably passed each other so many times when we were really young. And we grew up about an hour and 15 minutes, hour and a half away from each other. And he used to actually come to the town where I lived to take piano lessons. I knew his teacher. and yet, we didn't actually meet each other, and we didn't cross paths again until we were much older, until I think like three years ago. It's when we actually met in person for the first time. But I also really admire Connor's work because it's just very Navajo. Like, yes, he's classically trained. Yes, he has the diploma from Eastman, but he came home and he contextualized, Navajo music for, contextualized classical music for a Navajo ear. And his songs are very Navajo. They're just inherently Navajo, but many people are able to relate to them, and he draws from his experiences in learning classical music, and he applies that to the work that he does now. So, yeah,
another one of my favorite is Chris Dirksen, Two-Spirit Korean Mennonite composer and cellist. I came across Chris probably my junior year when I was in college at CU Boulder, and I just found her music completely just really inspiring, and it brought up this new realm of music making that I never even thought could exist. The album Powwow, Orchestral Powwow, was really wonderful to just really dive into and hear the way that Chris uses concepts of like orchestral music with powwow music, and that was just really phenomenal, especially having grown up going to powwow, hearing those familiar hearing the familiar from both sides was just really wonderful, and hearing it collaborate was really just great to see and hear. So that's definitely another artist. Also fellow violist, Melody McIver. Woo! Viola.
Yay! Melody.
Of course, Melody is an inspiration to me. So that there are so many amazing artists though out there, ones that I still have yet to discover. So
yeah, and you know, as for non-classical artists, I really enjoy Didat. It's a Defy and Delbert Anderson trio, and Delbert Anderson trio is a jazz band, and the leader of the trio is Delbert Anderson. He's a Navajo trumpet player, and they work with Defy, who is a Navajo rapper, and it works. The music that they come out with, it's like jazz, hip hop, and it's so good. So check out their work if you ever have a minute. But yeah, if you guys have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments. And yeah, I see Susan has a question.
Thanks, Susan, for the question. Susan says, so great to hear both of you. How can we approach performance of pieces like Rameau today with respect and contemporary context? This is a great question, and this is something that obviously I'm working on. It's really a difficult thing to address as well, because when it comes to engaging with these works, of course you want to be sensitive, but first things first, I think the involvement of Indigenous peoples within the context, so that you are able to get these alternative perspectives and these alternative histories, and then building relationships. This is not something that you can necessarily approach like a normal classical musician. You can't just decide to give a concert like you usually do and have it scheduled, start rehearsals, and then go. This is something that that needs to start to develop protocol around, and what that protocol looks like, and what the engagement with Indigenous peoples looks like, the relationship you're building looks like. It's much more, and that's kind of part of what like Renata and I talk about when we talk about deconstructing these sorts of things, is how do we take a step back and just challenge kind of the way the classical sphere exists in general. These performance spaces, I love what Renata said about performance spaces, and whether there should, whether it is a space or what that feels like or who that's for. And that's something that when I engage with these works, it's a difficult and hard thing to grapple with. How do we create the space that feels comfortable, that isn't objectifying, that isn't making certain portrayals, negative portrayals, come out of the cracks again, and it's definitely something that needs to be addressed with just in the general sphere. So I am also asking that question, and I will continue to ask that question. But something that I would recommend just in general is picking up the book Hungry Listening by Dylan Robinson. That book is really phenomenal, and it actually has a section about early music and engaging with some of these works as well. So I would definitely suggest reading that, and that will kind of help inspire some thoughts as well.
It looks like Erica has another question for you. about your collaboration you did with Leon Littlebird and Carpe Diem Quartet.
Yes, this was one of my favorite collaborations, and this is what really inspired me to start to reconnect and recognize that I didn't have to walk these two worlds, that I could exist as an individual, as a person, and as a Native person within Western art music. It was just a really great experience. So those of you who don't know, there was a work called Anthem for the Ancestors that was a collaboration between Leon Littlebird and the Carpe Diem String Quartet at CU Boulder. And it was an extremely powerful work. It was a reflection on the histories and experiences of Indigenous peoples. And Leon and the Carpe Diem String Quartet both contributed to the creation of this piece. It was in 5 movements, and it was various reflections of different time periods. And so, let's see, collaborative compositions like this, I think this was a great example of what a collaboration could look like, because Indigenous peoples within this collaboration were elevated and given the opportunity to show and portray the way we wanted to. Plus, we weren't masking all Indigenous peoples within this. It was very clearly Leon, who is Navajo, and myself as Karuk. So one of the movements was in my language and a specific story about our interaction with settlers. So that, I think, was a great example of that sort of thing. And those sorts of collaborations, I think, are extremely helpful to the field itself, because it creates space and opportunity to not only give it a go and give it a try in presenting works like this, but also engaging, and then later even being critical and figuring out ways in which we can create even a better space the next time around. So yeah, that's my question, or that's my answer.
Yeah. For me, I've not particularly done collaborative composition, but I worked with a Serbian violinist, Stefan Milenkovic, on a collaborative performance series where he came out here to a tribal college in Albuquerque called Southwestern Indian Polytechnic Institute, and he gave a concert. And I ended up, writing for a class about that, but about how the entire sort of classical music community, they saw it as like there was a lady who came up to me at the concert, and I remember her being like, "So you're going to use him, right?" And I was like, "You use him?" And she's like, "Well, yeah, he's so famous. Like you're gonna make use of that, aren't you?" And I was like, "Ah." I didn't know really how to answer that, other than to say, it's not me using him. It's literally like my presence at this event at a tribal college that's giving him like the what's the word? Giving why people came. It wasn't just because, he's the famous violinist. People came because I was working with him, and because I was the one who was a part of it. They were like, okay, then he must be okay. Like this should be good. this should be a good experience. And so I think, when we're talking about collaborative work, who is it for? Like, what is the intended audience? My intended audience is almost always going to be my own people. And how am I going to make sure that the collaboration speaks to them and is done in a good way for them? So, yeah. I think Jessica had a random question, but how do you feel about Western music notation? It has its use, but I don't think it's a nuanced way to understand much more than what the notes you're supposed to play are.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah.
Chris, thank you both. Okay. My question is, reaching an authentic space with classical music institutions can be dangerous given all of the historical and current problems within classical music that suppress and exploit artists of color. What resource steps should the industry need to be taking to do their part in amplifying Indigenous voices in a genuine way?
That is a very good question. Yeah, I personally have experienced a lot of hostility within these institutions, especially when it comes to engaging with or recognizing these very hierarchical ways of thinking and thought. I found that the strongest, or the time that I felt strongest, and or the time that I noticed the biggest differences, is when there are people who understand, want to be an ally, and want to take steps towards resolving some of these difficulties together. There need to be specific spaces, I think, for various minority people. I found my most strength, especially at CU, within the Native American and Indigenous Studies Center, being amongst community and people who really just understood, was just a huge relief off of my shoulders. I think that those sorts of things need to be talked about. The investment in those spaces need to be talked about. Mm-hmm. And in a way, once those spaces are really talked about, that creates the ability to start to engage in conversations. People need to come and sit down and listen for a little bit. And not in a way that you're sitting there just to consume and feel pity towards somebody, but in a way where you feel inspiration to do something and to be better, and to constantly just engage, critical thinking around these things, and that the systems that we know, the systems that we're comfortable in, are not the way of being for so many people. Recognizing that there are different ways that we walk through this world that need to be acknowledged, recognized, and given space.
Yeah, I think a really great example of what not to do was there was a composer who came to workshop an opera at my institution, and the opera was based around a figure that was married to a Pueblo man, and none of the research that went to the opera itself, none of it reflected that there had been any conversation with any Native person, particularly any Pueblo people who were able to respond or to critique or to advise how this opera was being written. And I was like, all you literally had to do was walk to the library. Like, the library is a 3-minute walk away, and there's an entire Indigenous Nations library program there for you to take advantage of. Like, I don't understand how hard that was. And really, actually, truly, Native people, when you're going to do these kinds of events, Native people need to be involved in every step of the way, from the conception of the idea to its execution. So what the industry should be doing is involving Native people respectfully and without using exploitative measures to be involved with taking these action steps every step of the way. And there's a balance between, saying I'm going to involve Native people and then just make them do all the work. That's not what we're saying either. yeah, I think it just really comes down to being humble and listening with an open heart and being willing to put aside what you think you know and being willing to put aside your ego and put aside the scholar hat sometimes, and just really sit down and open your heart to what we are saying and to take it in stride and think about it and mull over it and just overall just do it in a good way without negative intent. Okay, last question. One final action step for those attending this discussion.
I'm going to second what you just said. Be humble and do things in a good way. Yeah. And I think what that looks like in action, do research, take some time to educate yourself. It can be hard sometimes, but there's this amazing tool called Google, and that also is a great space to find some resources and such. Join some communities online, and be available and willing to listen. Yeah, I think those are kind of my last thoughts.
Yeah, I think what Jessica says, your compassionate listening, and being an accomplice to Indigenous rights. Yeah, I mean, if you're, yes, land back, no DAPL. Yeah, getting involved with and supporting, your local Indigenous community initiatives. There are so many different things going on all over, North America, in Canada, and in the United States, and in Mexico, where Indigenous people are rising up to accomplish something that will contribute to promoting the sovereignty of Indigenous people. We are sovereign nations. We are sovereign nations within a sovereign nation, and that sovereignty, it needs to be highlighted. When you're interacting with us and interacting with our work, we are sovereign peoples, and I think that's important to keep in mind when you are interacting with us and with our work and with our music. So yeah.
Amazing. Yes. What a powerful, powerful discussion. Wow. I have so many brain explosion emoji moments throughout. I think everybody who was in the chat absolutely did. If you're in the chat, please drop some words of gratitude for these incredible women taking their time to share so much knowledge and brilliance with us this evening. A big, big thank you again, Renata, Bree, for joining us and for really using your voices to call us to action. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Yotwa, thank you, Angelica.
Yes, thank you.
Amazing. That's right, Jessica. In awe. What a phenomenal discussion. We're so excited to continue to amplify the voices of Indigenous thinkers and leaders and artists. And we are really excited by a final performance to kind of end our time together. And this will feature CTS dancer Michael Morris Jr. Performing the work of Connor Chi and his resilience. Hey, Michael, how are you? Welcome to the chat.
Angelica, how are you doing?
I am well. Wasn't that an amazing discussion? We have so many people who are blown away. Was it not just
so informative, so needed, perfect timing, perfect place.
Absolutely. And I think what's so powerful is we can continue to listen to these voices. We can amplify these voices. And for us who are non-Indigenous peoples, we can continue to use our art form to be a platform to celebrate the phenomenal work of this community. And so we're doing that tonight by you performing the work of Connor Chee. So tell us a little bit about what Connor Chee's resilience means to you as an artist.
Connor's resilience to me means anyone who has been halted in any way in their life, overcoming that with strength, with power, with endurance. And I think not only for the Indigenous community, but for the arts community in general, all of our lives have been put on halt, beyond our control. And I think right now we are being required to show the strength and the power and the endurance that we have to overcome all of our careers being put on halt right now. And I think that we are all just like skyrocketing and showing how powerful we all are beyond what we thought that we were.
Absolutely. It's so true to see the ways that musicians and artists are innovating. I mean, even for us to be able to join across the world, really right now, across the nation, and bring people together in such a powerful way. It's really, really important. And, Connor Chee's work also really has close ties to Standing Rock. And really just thinking about that experience and the resilience that was shown in that time, and the protests and the way that people really stood up for truth and for justice. And it's so powerful to kind of see that brought to light in dance as well. And so for you, Michael, what does it mean for you as an artist to continue to sort of amplify these voices in your work?
I think for me as an artist, my job right now is just to continue to show the strength and the perseverance that I know that all of us have. And I think it is not until we are put in moments such as right now, between like the racial injustice that we're all going through and just all the craziness within this world right now, we don't know how strong we are until we're put in moments like these.
Absolutely. And it's been such a powerful experience to work on this piece together and really hear from Connor and understand more about that work to inform the work that we do pushing forward. And so with that, I am going to turn it over to a beautiful performance of Connor Chee's Resilience with dancer Michael Morris Jr. Amazing. Again, that is Connor Chi, brilliant Navajo pianist and composer's work, Resilience, with dancer Michael Morris Jr. Everyone is blowing up the chat. Absolutely beautiful. A stunning work. Gosh, those arpeggios. I agree. It was amazing. Really just a phenomenal work. We're so excited to continue to amplify these voices through the work that we do at Challenge the Stats. And so I want to thank everyone for joining us this evening for such a powerful discussion and a time of performance. And we heard so much tonight. I hope that you will take what you have learned and really put it into action. Think about that first action step that you can take and really work towards our collective liberation. It takes all of us. And so we hope that you will join us at our next event for Challenge the Stats. That is Rhythm of the Roots, happening April 10th, featuring 10 BIPOC artists performing the music of all living BIPOC composers. It is going to be a party, and we would love to have you there April 10th at 8 o'clock. Again, thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you for the beautiful comments in the chat. Please continue to amplify all of these voices that you have heard tonight, and thank you for being a part of our family. Have a great evening, everybody. Bye-bye.